Much of what we're going to talk about today is why you need a solution like Spark when it comes to big data, and how this fits with what customers and organizations today are really struggling with when it comes to actually accessing a lot of data at scale and working with a lot of data at scale. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a quick overview of what ClearStory actually focuses on, but to be clear, the purpose of this session is not so much to dig into specifics about what a ClearStory solution is all about, but rather what organizations are really struggling with today and the type of analytics interactivity and speed of analytics that they're looking for that Spark plays a big role in, that we think is going to be very critical when it comes to the big data problem moving forward. So on a quick overview here on ClearStory, so we are specifically focused on solving the problem of converging data from disparate sources, both internal sources, external sources. Your internal sources could be sources like Hadoop, your legacy data warehouse, databases, et cetera, as well as a host of external sources that companies and users want to bring into the mix with their private data to drive what we call a converged insight or a connected insight. This is becoming a bigger and bigger problem as organizations deal with a lot of heterogeneity in their data and are trying to tap into very disparate sources. So what are some of these sources that I'm talking about? When it comes to private data, I think you're all very familiar with what the common sources of data are that they're trying to tap into, including Hadoop-based platforms, such as those from Cloudera, Hortonworks, Adapt, et cetera, as well as pre-existing data that they've housed in their data warehouses, RDBMS systems, as well as cloud-based applications such as Salesforce.com, Google Analytics, and such. So there are a lot of private data sources emerging across organizations. It's created all these islands of data everywhere. And we're at a point right now where organizations are now trying to bring this all together in a more intelligent and smart way so they can actually drive a converged insight. In addition to that, there's another big phenomena happening, which is that there's been an explosion in the amount of public and external data available over the web. And if you look back about 5-6 years, there were less than about 100 open data APIs on the web. And today there are over 8,000 open data APIs. And not all of these are necessarily super high value to Global 2000 companies, but there are many of them that do offer a lot of data that these organizations are trying to tap into that's highly valuable when brought into the context of their own private data. So driving and enabling this convergence or merging these worlds of private data with public and web data is a big phenomena happening out there that we really believe in. The interesting thing is when you look at all of this data out there, especially on the external side, only about 3% of this data is actually tagged, and today about 0.5% of it is actually brought into the kind of analysis that large companies are trying to do. The reason for this is because it's very hard to tap into a lot of those sources, and there's no good way to do it because you have to go to each unique source and figure out all its nuances. So trying to smoothen and address that issue and making all this external data more usable in the context of private data is definitely one of the things that we at ClearStory see as an important factor moving forward when it comes to solving one of the problems in the big data world. But when you try and do all this and bring all this data together, whether it be data from the web, such as clickstream data, social data, et cetera, combined with private data from your RDBMS solutions, Hadoop, CSV files, combined with premium data sources that may contain market intelligence data, survey data, et cetera, or public data that may include things like census data, weather data that's openly available on the web. When you try and pull this all together, not only are you dealing with a lot of data at a large volume, so a lot of scale, but in addition to that, the users inside of most organizations today that are trying to drive this converged analysis have expectations on a platform where they want to be able to see things as they unfold. They want a high degree of interactivity with all this data. They expect basically to be able to get insights very quickly. And that's really where Spark comes in. So really solving the problem on top of big data platforms and bringing more interactivity and low latency processing to this issue so that you can now enable users across organizations to see data when they need to see it faster, and bring a high degree of interactivity around a converged analysis. The type of specific examples that Stephanie is going to talk about, and again, we highlight these couple of examples, there are many, many more, but just to pick on a couple here, the purpose of these particular examples that Stephanie's going to go through is to just, again, shed light on what are companies trying to do and what are the type of demands that they have on big data platforms today that require solutions like Spark and Shark, and how Matei and team at the AMP Lab have been addressing this and what they are building and what they're working on that we think is going to be very critical moving forward. So firstly, when you look at multi-source analysis, as I talked about a second ago, and you bring data in from many different sources, customers expect to be able to actually interact with this in a very fast, low latency type of manner, because they want to be able to answer questions at the right time and sometimes in near real time. So a high degree of interactivity, low latency processing, near real time type of answers across multi-source insights is very important. The second big area that comes up a lot is this notion of live situational analysis, which means that as events are happening out there and you're tapping into data from multiple sources, you want to be able to see insights as they unfold. So literally being able to let business users see insights as they happen and as data starts entering the environment from multiple sources. So that's what we sometimes call live situational analysis. There are many other terms for this, but the most interesting point here is the speed and the level of interactivity that people expect when they're doing this type of analysis. And then finally, some level of automated analytics, or almost self-learning analytics, where you bring together data from many sources and you start understanding basically some of the aspects of the data from these sources and learn as you go along the type of trends that to look for. To some extent, it gets into some level of predictive analytics as well, but really being able to automate the notion of being able to see trends as they're happening. So these are like three examples that Stephanie will, give you some details around each of these, but the main point is there are many, many examples out there of the type of big data analytics that companies are trying to do, that they're trying to do this year, next year, et cetera, that are very critical to how Spark and Shark actually address this problem. So we believe that MapReduce, being a great framework on top of Hadoop, has its purpose in the big data world. It's great for batch processing. It's great for many other type of analytics. But when it comes to the type of analytics that require near real-time answers, high degree of interactivity, and low latency processing, we believe that technologies like Spark and Shark are going to play a very important role moving forward.